Marcus leaned back, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "Political protection," he said. "That explains how he survived all these complaints." Back at home, Zora sat in her bedroom, carefully documenting her injuries. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to a deep purple, and her split lip had swollen. Using her phone, she took photos from multiple angles, then began writing a detailed statement of what had happened. Her father had taught her the importance of contemporaneous documentation, a lesson she had never expected to need. As she worked, she noticed a car parked across the street from their modest townhouse. It had been there for over an hour, and the driver seemed to be watching their front door. When she pulled back the curtain for a better look, the car immediately started and drove away. The next day at school, Zora noticed the same car following her bus. During lunch period, she spotted another unmarked police car in the school parking lot. They were watching her. Meanwhile, Officer Jenkins was beginning to regret his actions in the park. After returning to the precinct, he had run a background check on Zora Washington, something he should have done before confronting her. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Her address was listed, but information about her parents was heavily redacted, marked with government security classifications he'd never seen before. "What the hell did you get us into, Jenkins?" Thompson had asked when he saw the redactions. "I don't know," Jenkins admitted, "but I don't like it." That evening, Jenkins met with Captain Sullivan in a bar 3 towns over, where they wouldn't be recognized. "There's something off about this girl," Jenkins explained, sliding his phone across the table to show Sullivan the redacted information. "She's connected to someone with serious clearance." Sullivan studied the screen, his expression grim. "This could be a problem," he admitted. "But we've handled problems before. You think she's going to file a complaint?" Jenkins nodded. "Definitely. She was documenting everything, taking pictures of her face where He trailed off. "Where you assaulted a minor," Sullivan finished, his voice hard. "Jesus Christ, Jenkins, what were you thinking?" "She was disrespectful, talking about probable cause like some civil rights lawyer." Sullivan sighed heavily. "Well, we can't change that now. We need to get ahead of this." He took a long drink of his whiskey. "If she files a complaint, we'll discredit her. Make her look like the criminal, not you." "How?" "Leave that to me," Sullivan replied, already formulating a plan. "I've got friends at her school. By the time I'm done, no one will believe a word she says." Neither man noticed the small device under their table, capturing every word of their conversation for Marcus Washington's ears. Captain Sullivan wasted no time implementing his plan to destroy Zora's credibility. The morning after his meeting with Jenkins, he contacted an old friend who worked security at Westridge Academy. "Need a favor, Rick," Sullivan explained. "There's a student there who's causing trouble for one of my officers. Need to make sure she gets what's coming to her." An hour before classes began, Jenkins arrived at the school in plain clothes, carrying a small package. The security guard met him at a side entrance, disabling the cameras for the 2 minutes it took Jenkins to reach Zora's locker, plant the evidence, and exit the building. By third period, everything was in place. Zora was in advanced placement literature, discussing Toni Morrison's Beloved when the classroom door swung open. Principal Davis entered, followed by 3 uniformed police officers and a K-9 unit. "We're conducting a random drug sweep," he announced, though the school had never held one before. "Please remain seated while the officers do their work." The German Shepherd moved methodically through the rows of desks, sniffing backpacks and students' belongings. When it reached Zora, the dog sat down, signaling an alert. "Miss Washington," one of the officers said, "please come with us." Confused and increasingly terrified, Zora followed them into the hallway where more officers waited. Students pressed against classroom windows, watching as the officers led her to her locker. "Open it," they instructed. With trembling hands, Zora entered her combination. As the locker door swung open, an officer reached in and pulled out a small package from beneath her textbooks. "Is this yours?" he asked, already knowing the answer. The package contained nearly 30 grams of cocaine, enough to charge her with intent to distribute, a felony that carried a minimum 5-year sentence. "No," Zora said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've never seen that before in my life." "That's what they all say," the officer replied, nodding to his colleagues. In front of the entire school, they handcuffed her, reading her rights as they led her through the main hallway. Students whispered and pointed, some taking videos on their phones. Zora held her head high, but inside, she was crumbling. She knew exactly what was happening. This was retaliation. By lunchtime, she was sitting in a holding cell at the juvenile detention center, charged with felony drug possession with intent to distribute. The school had already processed her emergency suspension. Her perfect academic record, her scholarship, her future, all hung in the balance. She was allowed one phone call, which she used to contact her father. Marcus Washington was in a classified briefing when his secure phone vibrated. Seeing Zora's number, he excused himself immediately. "Dad," her voice broke as she explained what had happened. Marcus listened in silence, his mind already calculating, planning. "Don't say anything else to anyone," he instructed her. "I'm sending our attorney to get you released. Don't answer any questions without her present." After hanging up, Marcus sat motionless for exactly 10 seconds, allowing himself to feel the full force of his rage before compartmentalizing it. Then he went to work. His first call was to Sarah Chen, the best criminal defense attorney in the state and a former CIA legal counsel. His second was to Elena. "They've escalated," he told her. "They've planted drugs on Zora and had her arrested. I need the school security footage from this morning." "They'll have deleted it," Elena replied. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But I trained you better than to rely on what they expect you to find." Within an hour, Elena had accessed backup cloud storage that the school's administrators didn't even know existed. And there, caught in high definition, was Officer Jenkins entering the school through a side door, moving directly to Zora's locker, and planting the package. "We've got them," Marcus said, watching the footage. But his victory was short-lived. The news had already picked up the story of an elite private school student arrested for drug dealing. Though they didn't name Zora because she was a minor, they mentioned she was one of the few scholarship students from the East Side, a thinly veiled reference to her race and economic background. The damage to her reputation was already spreading, and Marcus knew from experience that even with evidence of police misconduct, the system was designed to protect its own. Clearing her name would require more than just proving her innocence. It would mean taking down the entire corrupt network that had targeted his daughter. In her holding cell, Zora curled into herself, trying to become invisible to the other detained juveniles. Her father had always protected her, but for the first time in her life, she wondered if even he could fix this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone in authority tried to frame you or someone you know? Type "justice" in the comments if you believe the truth will eventually come out, or "system" if you think the deck is stacked against people like Zora. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how Marcus will use his CIA skills to fight back against this corruption. What evidence will he uncover next? And will it be enough to save his daughter's future? The next part of this story will shock you. The elegant brownstone of Judge Elaine Harper sat nestled between two historic mansions in the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. Unlike her neighbors, Judge Harper hadn't inherited her wealth. She'd earned it through 30 years of unwavering integrity on the federal bench. It was that integrity that had first connected her with Marcus Washington 15 years earlier during a classified national security case. Now, as she reviewed the security footage showing Officer Jenkins planting drugs in Zora's locker, her weathered face hardened with controlled fury. "This is textbook evidence tampering," she said, looking up at Marcus. And with the officer clearly visible, It should be enough to get the charges against Zora dismissed immediately. Marcus nodded, but remained tense. But it won't end there. Jenkins and Sullivan aren't going to stop just because they got caught once. No, Judge Harper agreed. They won't. She leaned back in her leather chair, fingertips pressed together. This isn't the first case like this I've seen, Marcus. Not even the first this year. She turned to her computer and pulled up a database of cases. There's a pattern here. Over the past 18 months, 14 black teenagers have been arrested in that precinct for drug possession. All of them attended either Westridge Academy or Riverside High. All were honor students or athletes. All were charged with possession with intent to distribute. And all eventually accepted plea deals, despite maintaining their innocence. Marcus's analytical mind immediately spotted the connection. They're targeting kids with futures to lose, kids who can't afford to fight prolonged legal battles. Exactly, Judge Harper confirmed. The families are pressured into accepting pleas that include probité. Marcus leaned back, the pieces beginning to fall into place. Political protection, he said. That explains how he survived all these complaints. Back at home, Zora sat in her bedroom, carefully documenting her injuries. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to a deep purple, and her split lip had swollen. Using her phone, she took photos from multiple angles, then began writing a detailed statement of what had happened. Her father had taught her the importance of contemporaneous documentation, a lesson she had never expected to need. As she worked, she noticed a car parked across the street from their modest townhouse. It had been there for over an hour, and the driver seemed to be watching their front door. When she pulled back the curtain for a better look, the car immediately started and drove away. The next day at school, Zora noticed the same car following her bus. During lunch period, she spotted another unmarked police car in the school parking lot. They were watching her. Meanwhile, Officer Jenkins was beginning to regret his actions in the park. After returning to the precinct, he had run a background check on Zora Washington, something he should have done before confronting her. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Her address was listed, but information about her parents was heavily redacted, marked with government security classifications. He'd never seen before. "What the hell did you get us into, Jenkins?" Thompson had asked when he saw the redactions. "I don't know," Jenkins admitted, "but I don't like it." That evening, Jenkins met with Captain Sullivan in a bar 3 towns over, where they wouldn't be recognized. "There's something off about this girl," Jenkins explained, sliding his phone across the table to show Sullivan the redacted information. "She's connected to someone with serious clearance." Sullivan studied the screen, his expression grim. "This could be a problem," he admitted. "But we've handled problems before. You think she's going to file a complaint?" Jenkins nodded. "Definitely. She was documenting everything, taking pictures of her face He trailed off. "Where you assaulted a minor," Sullivan finished, his voice hard. "Jesus Christ, Jenkins, what were you thinking?" "She was disrespectful, talking about probable cause like some civil rights lawyer." Sullivan sighed heavily. "Well, we can't change that now. We need to get ahead of this." He took a long drink of his whiskey. "If she files a complaint, we'll discredit her. Make her look like the criminal, not you." "How?" "Leave that to me," Sullivan replied, already formulating a plan. "I've got friends at her school. By the time I'm done, no one will believe a word she says." Neither man noticed the small device under their table, capturing every word of their conversation for Marcus Washington's ears. Captain Sullivan wasted no time implementing his plan to destroy Zora's credibility. The morning after his meeting with Jenkins, he contacted an old friend who worked security at Westridge Academy. "Need a favor, Rick," Sullivan explained. "There's a student there who's causing trouble for one of my officers. Need to make sure she gets what's coming to her." An hour before classes began, Jenkins arrived at the school in plain clothes, carrying a small package. The security guard met him at a side entrance, disabling the cameras for the 2 minutes it took Jenkins to reach Zora's locker, plant the evidence, and exit the building. By third period, everything was in place. Zora was in advanced placement literature, discussing Toni Morrison's Beloved when the classroom door swung open. Principal Davis entered, followed by 3 uniformed police officers and a K-9 unit. "We're conducting a random drug sweep," he announced, though the school had never held one before. "Please remain seated while the officers do their work." The German Shepherd moved methodically through the rows of desks, sniffing backpacks and students' belongings. When it reached Zora, the dog sat down, signaling an alert. "Miss Washington," one of the officers said, "please come with us." Confused and increasingly terrified, Zora followed them into the hallway where more officers waited. Students pressed against classroom windows, watching as the officers led her to her locker. "Open it," they instructed. With trembling hands, Zora entered her combination. As the locker door swung open, an officer reached in and pulled out a small package from beneath her textbooks. "Is this yours?" he asked, already knowing the answer. The package contained nearly 30 grams of cocaine, enough to charge her with intent to distribute, a felony that carried a minimum 5-year sentence. "No," Zora said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've never seen that before in my life." "That's what they all say," the officer replied, nodding to his colleagues. In front of the entire school, they handcuffed her, reading her rights as they led her through the main hallway. Students whispered and pointed, some taking videos on their phones. Zora held her head high, but inside, she was crumbling. She knew exactly what was happening. This was retaliation. By lunchtime, she was sitting in a holding cell at the Juvenile Detention Center, charged with felony drug possession with intent to distribute. The school had already processed her emergency suspension. Her perfect academic record, her scholarship, her future, all hung in the balance. She was allowed one phone call, which she used to contact her father. Marcus Washington was in a classified briefing when his secure phone vibrated. Seeing Zora's number, he excused himself immediately. "Dad," her voice broke as she explained what had happened. Marcus listened in silence, his mind already calculating, planning. "Don't say anything else to anyone," he instructed her. "I'm sending our attorney to get you released. Don't answer any questions without her present." After hanging up, Marcus sat motionless for exactly 10 seconds, allowing himself to feel the full force of his rage before compartmentalizing it. Then he went to work. His first call was to Sarah Chen, the best criminal defense attorney in the state and a former CIA legal counsel. His second was to Elena. "They've escalated," he told her. "They've planted drugs on Zora and had her arrested. I need the school security footage from this morning." "They'll have deleted it," Elena replied. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But I trained you better than to rely on what they expect you to find." Within an hour, Elena had accessed backup cloud storage that the school's administrators didn't even know existed. And there, caught in high definition, was Officer Jenkins entering the school through a side door, moving directly to Zora's locker, and planting the package. "We've got them," Marcus said, watching the footage. But his victory was short-lived. The news had already picked up the story of an elite private school student arrested for drug dealing. Though they didn't name Zora because she was a minor, they mentioned she was one of the few scholarship students from the East Side, a thinly veiled reference to her race and economic background. The damage to her reputation was already spreading, and Marcus knew from experience that even with evidence of police misconduct, the system was designed to protect its own. Clearing her name would require more than just proving her innocence. It would mean taking down the entire corrupt network that had targeted his daughter. In her holding cell, Zora curled into herself, trying to become invisible to the other detained juveniles. Her father had always protected her, but for the first time in her life, she wondered if even he could fix this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone in authority tried to frame you or someone you know? Type justice in the comments if you believe the truth will eventually come out, or system if you think the deck is stacked against people like Zora. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how Marcus will use his CIA skills to fight back against this corruption. What evidence will he uncover next? And will it be enough to save his daughter's future? The next part of this story will shock you. The elegant brownstone of Judge Elaine Harper sat nestled between two historic mansions in the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. Unlike her neighbors, Judge Harper hadn't inherited her wealth. She'd earned it through 30 years of unwavering integrity on the federal bench. It was that integrity that had first connected her with Marcus Washington 15 years earlier during a classified national security case. Now, as she reviewed the security footage showing Officer Jenkins planting drugs in Zora's locker, her weathered face hardened with controlled fury. "This is textbook evidence tampering," she said, looking up at Marcus. "And with the officer clearly visible, it should be enough to get the charges against Zora dismissed immediately." Marcus nodded, but remained tense. "But it won't end there. Jenkins and Sullivan aren't going to stop just because they got caught once." "No," Judge Harper agreed. "They won't." She leaned back in her leather chair, fingertips pressed together. "This isn't the first case like this I've seen, Marcus. Not even the first this year." She turned to her computer and pulled up a database of cases. "There's a pattern here. Over the past 18 months, 14 black teenagers have been arrested in that precinct for drug possession. All of them attended either Westridge Academy or Riverside High. All were honor students or athletes. All were charged with possession with intent to distribute. And all eventually accepted plea deals, despite maintaining their innocence." Marcus's analytical mind immediately spotted the connection. They're targeting kids with futures to lose, kids who can't afford to fight prolonged legal battles. "Exactly," Judge Harper confirmed. "The families are pressured into accepting pleas that include probitur. Officer Thompson and someone named Rodriguez. They said they'd charge me as an accomplice if I didn't cooperate." While Marcus gathered testimony from Aisha, Attorney Sarah Chen was orchestrating Zora's release from juvenile detention. But the system designed to protect children was being weaponized against her. Despite the exculpatory evidence, the prosecutor was dragging his feet, arguing that the chain of custody for the security footage couldn't be verified. By evening, Zora was finally released to her father's custody. But the charges hadn't been dropped, and worse, the local news had escalated their coverage. A continuing investigation into drug trafficking at elite Westridge Academy has led to the arrest of an East Side scholarship student, the anchor reported. Sources close to the investigation suggest this may be part of a larger drug ring operating in several prestigious schools across the district. The coded racial language wasn't subtle. Without naming her, they had effectively labeled Zora as a drug dealer from the bad part of town who had infiltrated a good school. The comment sections on these news articles, filled with racist assumptions and calls for harsher sentencing for these people who don't appreciate opportunities given to them. Marcus watched his daughter reading these comments, her face a mask of controlled hurt. In that moment, he made a decision. This wasn't just about clearing Zora's name anymore. The entire corrupt system needed to be exposed and dismantled. As Zora finally fell asleep that night, emotionally exhausted, Marcus made a call to the one person he knew could help him navigate the legal and political minefield ahead. "Judge Harper," he said when she answered, "I need everything you have on these cases, and I need to know which other judges might have noticed the pattern." Judge Harper's reply was immediate and resolute. "I'll have the files to you by morning, and—" "Marcus, I'm not the only one who's been watching these cases with concern. Judge Martinez and Judge Williams have both approached me about similar patterns in their courtrooms." For the first time since this nightmare began, Marcus felt the tide beginning to turn. The evidence was mounting, and soon it would be impossible to ignore. Dawn hadn't yet broken when Marcus arrived at the secure CIA facility where Elena Cortez had been working through the night. The evidence wall she had assembled would have impressed even the most seasoned intelligence analysts. Photos, financial records, case files, and connection maps covered every available surface. "It's bigger than we thought," Elena said without preamble. "Much bigger." She pointed to a cluster of photos showing Officer Jenkins meeting with various individuals at remote locations. Jenkins and Thompson aren't just dirty cops framing innocent kids. They're the muscle for a sophisticated drug operation. Marcus studied the images, recognizing the pattern of a well-organized criminal enterprise. They're seizing drugs during legitimate busts, logging only a portion into evidence, and then reselling the rest, Elena explained. The money flows through a series of shell companies before ending up in offshore accounts controlled by Captain Sullivan and this man. She tapped a photo of a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. Senator William Richards, chair of the State Security Committee and the Joint Law Enforcement Commission. Marcus's jaw tightened. Richards was a powerful political figure who had built his career on tough-on-crime rhetoric, often with racial undertones. "The victims aren't random," Elena continued. "They're specifically targeting high-achieving Black and Hispanic students. It serves multiple purposes. It destroys promising futures in minority communities, reinforces negative stereotypes, provides cover for their own drug operation, and supplies them with a perfect distraction whenever scrutiny gets too close." Marcus processed this information with the cold calculation of a career intelligence officer. "How many kids have they framed?" "At least 27 that we can document," Elena replied grimly. "All with the same MO as Zora's case." Judge Harper connected. "Us with 16 families willing to talk." That afternoon, Marcus met with these families in a conference room at Sarah Chen's law office. The stories were painfully similar. Honor students suddenly accused of drug dealing, evidence appearing mysteriously in lockers or backpacks, pressure to accept plea deals rather than risk trial and potential prison time, futures derailed, college, acceptances rescinded, scholarships lost. "My son had a full ride to MIT, one mother said, tears streaming down her face. "After the arrest, they pulled his scholarship. He's working at a warehouse now, still trying to save for community college." Another father described how his daughter, once outgoing and confident, had attempted suicide after her arrest. "She couldn't handle everyone thinking she was a dealer. She kept saying no one would believe her, that the system was rigged against her." As Marcus listened to these heartbreaking accounts, his secure phone buzzed. Elena had sent him another batch of files, including recordings of conversations between Sullivan and Senator Richards discussing their operation. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. A text message from a number that traced back to Jenkins read, "The kids. Father is asking questions, digging into old cases. What do you want us to do?" Richards's response was chilling in its simplicity. "Make it stop." Back at home, Zora was trying to maintain some semblance of normality despite the chaos engulfing her life. She had been barred from returning to school, pending her hearing, and her phone had been flooded with messages, some supportive from close friends, others vicious from classmates and strangers who believed the news reports. As she sat at her desk trying to keep up with her studies, a notification popped up on her screen. Someone had created a fake social media profile using her name and photo, posting offers to sell drugs to Westridge Academy students. Within hours, the profile had been shared hundreds of times as proof of her guilt. Worse, someone had leaked her home address and phone number. The threatening messages began almost immediately. "Drug dealers don't belong in our school. Go back to your ghetto. Next time the cops won't just slap you." Zora documented each message methodically, refusing to be intimidated. She didn't. Know that as she cataloged these threats, Senator Richards was learning about her father's true identity. The mole in the police department, who had been searching for information about Marcus Washington, had finally hit pay dirt. A heavily redacted file that nonetheless contained one crucial piece of information: his position as director of the Central Intelligence Agency. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Senator Richards shouted at Captain Sullivan over a secure line. "You had Jenkins assault the daughter of the CIA director. Are you trying to get us all killed?" Sullivan's voice was tight with fear. "We didn't know who she was. Her school records just listed him as a government employee." "Well, now he's using every resource at his disposal to investigate us," Richards snapped. "We need to contain this. Immediately. What do you want me to do?" "Find leverage," Richards ordered. "Everyone has a weakness. Find his. Have you ever witnessed corruption in organizations meant to protect us? Type truth in the comments if you believe uncovering corruption is worth the risk, or safety if you think some secrets are better. Left buried. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're rooting for Zora and her father to bring down this entire corrupt system. How far will Senator Richards go to protect his criminal enterprise? Could even a CIA director be outmaneuvered? When the corrupt system turns against him, the next twist in this story will leave you speechless. The first death threat arrived on Zora's phone at exactly 3:17 a.m. She woke to the harsh buzz of her phone vibrating against her nightstand, the screen illuminating her darkened bedroom. The message contained no words, just a video of someone loading a gun, followed by a photo of her walking to her bus stop, clearly taken that morning without her knowledge. Trembling, she immediately took her phone to her father's room. Marcus was already awake, reviewing files at his desk. One look at his daughter's face told him something was seriously wrong. "They're watching me," she whispered, handing him the phone. Marcus's expression remained neutral as he examined the message, but Zora knew her father well enough to recognize the cold fury building behind his eyes. "Pack a bag," he said calmly. "Essentials only. We're leaving in 10 minutes. While Zora gathered her things, Marcus activated emergency protocols. The safe house was prepared within moments, security teams dispatched, and extraction countermeasures set in motion. As they prepared to leave, Marcus's secure line rang. It was Elena. "They know," she said, without preamble. "Richards accessed your unredacted file through his committee clearance. They know exactly who you are now." "Understood," Marcus replied. "Accelerate the timeline. We need everything in place by tomorrow." Despite the urgent situation, Marcus maintained strict operational security as they left the house. Multiple decoy vehicles, randomized routes, and counter-surveillance measures ensured they weren't followed to the safe house, located in a nondescript suburban neighborhood 30 miles outside the city. The next morning, as Zora attempted to maintain some normality by continuing her studies in the safe house, Marcus received an encrypted message from Elena. Senator Richards had called an emergency closed-door session of his security committee, citing a potential compromise of national intelligence assets. It was a thinly veiled attempt to paint Marcus as a rogue agent misusing CIA resources for personal vendettas. Meanwhile, in downtown Riverside, Zora's attorney, Sarah Chen, was meeting with the district attorney, presenting the evidence of police misconduct in Zora's case. As she crossed the street afterward, a black SUV accelerated through a red light, coming straight for her. Only her quick reflexes saved her life as she lunged out of the way, the vehicle missing her by inches before speeding away without license plates. The message was clear. Everyone helping the Washingtons was now a target. Back at the safe house, Zora was reviewing her school assignments when she glanced out the window and noticed a mail carrier she didn't recognize approaching the house. Something about his gait seemed off. "Dad," she called out softly, backing away from the window. Marcus appeared instantly, assessed the situation with one glance, and moved Zora to the secure room at the center of the house. Through the security feed, they watched as the mail carrier circled the property, taking photos with a concealed camera. "How did they find us?" Zora whispered. Marcus's expression was grim. They shouldn't have been able to. The realization hit him like a physical blow. There was a mole, someone with access to CIA safe house locations, someone close. As if confirming his suspicions, His secure phone chimed with an incoming message. The text contained only an address. The location of their current safe house followed. By the words, "Nowhere to hide, Director Washington." Within minutes, they were on the move again, abandoning the compromised location using an emergency exit route. Marcus drove tensely, constantly checking for tails while making secure calls. To the few people he still trusted, they needed a new location, one not in any official database. "Elena," he said when she answered, "the River Point location is compromised. We need extraction to location November Delta." "On it," she replied curtly. "And Marcus, be careful who you trust right now. Wood is asking a lot of questions about your whereabouts." Deputy Director James Wood was Marcus's second in command, a man who had worked alongside him for over a decade. The implication that he might be involved sent a chill through Marcus. "Understood," he said, ending the call. They abandoned their vehicle in a shopping mall parking garage and transferred to an unmarked van driven by Elena herself. As they sped toward the new safe house, Zora stared out the window at the passing city lights. "They really aren't going to stop, are they?" she asked quietly. "No," Marcus answered honestly. "They can't afford to." What he didn't tell her was just how high the stakes had become. This wasn't just about corrupt cops anymore. If a U.S. senator was willing to directly threaten the CIA director, the conspiracy reached levels that threatened national security itself. 2 hours later, they arrived at a remote cabin owned off the books by one of Marcus's most trusted former operatives. As Elena helped them settle in, her phone buzzed with an alert. "Marcus," she said, her voice tight, "you need to see this." She handed him her tablet, displaying a breaking news story. The headline read, "CIA Director under investigation for alleged abuse of power." The article quoted anonymous sources claiming, Marcus Washington had deployed agency resources to harass local law enforcement after his daughter was legitimately arrested for drug dealing. It painted him as a rogue intelligence officer, using his position to obstruct justice and intimidate police officers. But the most damaging allegation was buried in the middle of the article. Claims that Marcus had previously used CIA resources to cover up his daughter's troubled past. "They're setting the stage to discredit everything we've uncovered," Elena said grimly. Marcus nodded, his mind already formulating counter-strategies. If they're moving this aggressively in public, they must be truly desperate. As they discussed next steps, a security alert triggered on Elena's phone. Motion sensors placed along the access road had detected vehicles approaching. "We have company," she said, pulling up the security feed on her tablet. 3 black SUVs were making their way up the isolated road toward the cabin. "How did they find us?" Zora asked, fear evident in her voice. Marcus's expression hardened as realization dawned. "Elena, your phone. They're tracking your phone." Elena's eyes widened as she immediately pulled out the battery, but it was too late. The vehicles were less than 2 minutes away. "The tunnel," Marcus said, moving quickly to a concealed door built into the floor of the pantry. Now, as they descended into the narrow escape tunnel, the sound of vehicles pulling up outside echoed through the cabin. Elena moved to follow them into the tunnel, but Marcus stopped her. "I need you to stay and stall them," he said urgently. "Find out who's leading this and what they know." "They'll arrest me," Elena protested. "Better arrested than dead," Marcus replied grimly. "Zora and I will reach out when we're secure." Elena nodded, understanding the impossible choice before them. As the tunnel door closed, Marcus and Zora heard the cabin door being broken down, followed by shouted commands for anyone inside to surrender. The tunnel stretched nearly half a mile, through the woods, eventually emerging in a small clearing where an old maintenance shed concealed an emergency vehicle. But as they approached the exit, Marcus suddenly pushed Zora back, signaling for silence. Through the small ventilation grate in the tunnel exit, they could see men with tactical gear surrounding the shed. Someone had known about the escape route. The trap was complete. "What now?" Zora whispered. the fear in her eyes mixed with determination, not to give up. Marcus assessed their options with the cool detachment that had kept him alive through decades of intelligence work. But before he could answer, a sharp pain exploded in his shoulder, spinning him against the tunnel wall. The muffled pop of a silenced weapon registered a split second later. Looking down, he saw blood spreading across his shirt from a bullet. Wound. Behind them, moving stealthily through the tunnel, came a figure in tactical gear, weapon raised for another shot. Blood soaked through Marcus's shirt as he pushed Zora behind him, his body becoming a human shield despite the searing pain in his shoulder. The tunnel was narrow, with no cover and nowhere to hide. The tactical officer advanced slowly, his silenced weapon aimed directly at Marcus's chest. "Director Washington," the man said, his voice emotionless. "Senator Richards sends his regards." In that moment, time seemed to slow as Marcus calculated their odds, nearly 0 against a trained assassin in a confined space. But what the assassin didn't account for was Zora Washington, who hadn't spent 16 years as the daughter of a CIA director without learning a few things. As the assassin's finger tensed on the trigger, Zora's hand shot out from behind her father, pressing the small panic button Marcus had given her years ago with the instruction to use it only in life-or-death situations. Instantly, the tunnel was plunged into absolute darkness as the EMP device disabled all electronic equipment within a 20-foot radius. The assassin's night vision goggles went black, his weapon's laser sight disappeared, and the tactical radio on his vest fell silent. In the pitch darkness, Marcus moved with the muscle memory of decades of training. Despite his injury, he lunged forward, connecting solidly with the assassin's midsection. The man stumbled backward, firing blindly, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating the tunnel in strobing bursts of light. Zora pressed herself against the wall, eyes closed to preserve her night vision, counting the shots as her father had taught her. 6 shots. Then the distinctive click of an empty chamber. The momentary silence was broken by the sound of a fierce struggle, grunts of pain and the dull thud of fists connecting with flesh. Then stillness. "Dad," Zora whispered into the darkness. "Move forward," came Marcus's strained reply. As they passed the motionless form of the assassin, Marcus retrieved the man's weapon and spare magazines. The bullet had gone through his shoulder, a clean wound, but one that was steadily draining his strength through blood loss. They couldn't exit through the shed as planned. The tactical team would be waiting. Instead, Marcus led Zora to a maintenance access point halfway between the tunnel entrance and exit. It emerged in a drainage culvert that ran beneath the rural highway a quarter-mile from the cabin. Zora helped her father climb through the narrow opening, his face pale from pain and blood loss. Above them, they could hear vehicles racing along the highway, undoubtedly reinforcements heading toward the cabin. "We need transportation," Marcus said, pressing his hand against his wound to slow the bleeding. Zora surveyed their surroundings, spotting a gas station about half a mile down. The highway. "Wait here," she said with a confidence that surprised even her. "I have an idea." Before Marcus could protest, she had slipped away through the underbrush paralleling the highway. 20 agonizing minutes later, she returned, driving an old pickup truck. "The owner went inside to pay," she explained as she helped her father into the passenger seat. "We have maybe 3 minutes before he comes back." As they pulled onto the highway, heading away from the roadblocks being established, Marcus used his good arm to retrieve a first aid kit from his go bag. As they pulled onto the highway, heading away from the roadblocks being established, Marcus used his good arm to retrieve a first aid kit from his go bag. "You need a hospital," Zora said, eyeing the blood-soaked fabric of his shirt. "Too risky," Marcus replied, injecting himself with a military-grade clotting agent and painkiller from the kit. "They'll have people watching emergency rooms." "Then where are we going?" "To the only person who can help us now," Marcus said, providing directions that led them deeper into the countryside. 2 hours later, they arrived at a modest farmhouse set back from a winding rural road. Despite his protests, Zora had to practically carry her father to the front door. Before they could knock, the door swung open to reveal Elena Cortez, her face bruised but her eyes alert. "You made it," she said, quickly ushering them inside. "Barely," Marcus replied, collapsing into a chair as Elena immediately began treating his wound. "How did you escape the cabin?" Zora asked. "They weren't there to arrest me," Elena explained grimly. "They were there to eliminate me. Fortunately, I've survived worse assassination attempts." While Elena expertly cleaned and bandaged Marcus's shoulder, she updated them on the rapidly deteriorating situation. "They're painting you as a rogue agent, Marcus. Richards is giving press conferences claiming you've had some kind of psychological break, using CIA resources to persecute innocent police officers because you can't accept your daughter's criminal behavior. And people are believing it?" Zora asked incredulously. "Some are," Elena admitted. "Richards is very convincing, and he has half the media in his pocket. But there's more. He's claiming you've stolen classified information and are planning to sell it to foreign entities." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, understanding the strategy. "He's setting the stage to justify killing us. If we're branded as traitors, our deaths become a matter of national security rather than murder." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "And it gets worse. I think I've identified our mole. Deputy Director James Wood has been feeding information to Richards for months. Financial records show payments to offshore accounts matching deposits after each of our safe house locations was compromised." Marcus absorbed this betrayal with the stoicism of a man who had spent his career prepared for the worst. "What about the evidence we've gathered on their drug operation?" "All still secure," Elena assured him. "I didn't trust the regular channels, so everything is on encrypted drives only I can access. The testimonies from the families, the financial records, the footage from Zora's case, it's all there." "Then we still have a chance," Marcus said, his color improving slightly as the medications took effect. "But we need to move quickly. Richards won't stop until we're silenced." As they formulated their next steps, Zora's phone, which had been off since they fled the first safe house, suddenly chimed with an incoming message. Everyone froze. "That's impossible," Marcus said. "Your phone's off and the battery is removed." "It's not my regular phone," Zora explained, pulling a small device from her pocket. "It's the secure one you gave me for emergencies, the one only 3 people have the number to." The message was from Aisha Johnson. "They took my parents. Said, they won't release them until I tell them where you are. Please help." Attached was a photo showing Aisha's parents being led into an unmarked police car by Officer Jenkins. "It's a trap," Elena said immediately. "They're using her to draw you out." "Of course it's a trap," Marcus agreed. "But those are innocent people being used as pawns. We can't abandon them." Despite his injury, Marcus's mind was already formulating a plan. This might be their one opportunity to turn the tables on Richards and his corrupt network. Rather than continuing to run, they would use this trap as a chance to set their own. "Elena," he said, his voice taking on the commanding tone that had led the CIA through countless crises. "Contact Judge Harper. Tell her we're ready to move. Then reach out to Maya Chen at the Washington Post. It's time to go public." Zora looked at her father in surprise. "You want to expose everything? Won't that compromise national security?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Richards is counting on that fear to keep us quiet, but he's forgotten something critical about intelligence work." "What's that?" Zora asked. "Always have a backup plan," Marcus replied, pulling a small device from his go bag. "And always keep the most damning evidence separate from everything else." As night fell, they prepared to execute the most dangerous operation of Marcus Washington's career. One with no official sanction, no backup, and his wounded shoulder a constant reminder of the stakes. If they failed, they would be labeled traitors and eliminated. But if they succeeded, they would expose a corruption network that reached the highest levels of government. And through it all, Zora remained by her father's side, no longer just a victim seeking justice, but a full partner in the operation to take down the people who had tried to destroy her future. Would you risk everything to expose corruption at the highest levels of government? Type courage in the comments if you believe standing up for the truth is worth any price, or caution if you think some battles are too dangerous to fight. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're on the edge of your seat waiting to see how Marcus and Zora will turn the tables on their powerful enemies. Can they truly outmaneuver a U.S. senator and his corrupt network of police? Or are they walking into a trap that will destroy them both? The most shocking revelations are yet to come. The humid night air clung to Zora's skin as she crouched behind an abandoned warehouse alongside her father and Elena. Despite his injury, Marcus moved. With the practiced stealth of a field operative, his decades of training overriding the pain that occasionally flickered across his face. They had arranged to meet the families of Jenkins and Sullivan's other victims at this remote location, far from police surveillance cameras and informants. One by one, shadowy figures arrived, moving cautiously through the darkness until 16 families had gathered in the dimly lit interior of the warehouse. Many looked frightened, others angry, but all shared the same determined expression. People who had been pushed too far and were finally pushing back. "Thank you for coming," Marcus began, his voice low but carrying in the cavernous space. "I know the risk you're taking by being here." A tall man stepped forward, his son, barely 13, standing close beside him. "After what they did to my boy, there's no risk I wouldn't take to bring them down." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled group. Marcus nodded. "Then let's get started." Over the next hour, they shared stories, evidence, and began piecing together a comprehensive picture of the corruption that had terrorized their community. Each family had documented the injustice they'd suffered: false arrests, planted evidence, coerced confessions, and lives derailed by fabricated charges. Some had managed to preserve crucial evidence despite police intimidation. As their testimony unfolded, journalist Maya Chen recorded everything, her experienced eyes widening at the scale of the conspiracy. "This goes beyond a few corrupt cops," she said, reviewing her notes. "This is systematic, and it reaches to the highest levels of state government." Elena added, showing Maya the financial records linking Senator Richards to the drug operation. A woman whose daughter had been wrongfully imprisoned spoke up, her voice breaking. "They told us no one would believe us, that it would be our word against theirs." "Not anymore," Marcus assured her. "Together, we have something they can't fight: the truth, documented and corroborated." As they formulated their plan, the warehouse door creaked open, causing everyone to freeze. A slender figure slipped inside, hood pulled low over her face. When she pushed it back, Zora recognized her immediately. "Aisha," she exclaimed, moving toward her friend before Marcus caught her arm, his instincts still on high alert. "How did you find us?" he demanded. "And where are your parents?" Aisha's eyes filled with tears. "They let them go after they realized I really didn't know where you were. But I remembered you mentioned this place once, Zora, when you talked about your dad's emergency protocols." Zora looked to her father, who nodded cautiously. "They're watching our house," Aisha continued. "Jenkins has officers following everyone who's ever spoken to either of you." Her eyes darted nervously around the room. "But I had to warn you."
"There's something bigger happening. Captain Sullivan is running for mayor. The announcement is tomorrow." This new information sent a ripple of concern through the group.
If Sullivan gained mayoral power, his ability to cover up corruption would increase exponentially. "We need to move faster than planned," Marcus decided. Maya Chen nodded in agreement. "I have enough for the initial story. I can have it ready by morning, but we'll need protection for these families once it breaks." "I've already arranged it," Elena assured them. "Judge Harper has federal marshals standing by, and I've secured safe accommodations outside Richards's jurisdiction." As the meeting concluded, Marcus pulled Zora aside. "You understand what happens next?" he asked quietly. Zora nodded, her young face set with determination that mirrored his own. "We spring their trap, but on our terms." "It will be dangerous," Marcus warned. "More dangerous than anything you've faced." Zora looked around at the families preparing to leave, their faces showing the same mix of fear and resolve that she felt. "I know," she replied. "But they tried to take my future, Dad. I want to be part of taking—" The evidence Maya had published that morning had created exactly the firestorm they'd anticipated. Jenkins and Thompson had gone to ground, but through Aisha, they had managed to get a message to Jenkins suggesting that Zora wanted to make a deal. In exchange for her father destroying all evidence against the corrupt network, she would publicly recant her accusations and take the fall for the drugs found in her locker. It was the lifeline a desperate man might grab, especially with Senator Richards undoubtedly breathing down his neck. The sound of a door opening somewhere in the building sent a chill down Zora's spine. They were early. "Someone's here," she whispered, knowing the sensitive mic would pick up her words. "Stay calm," her father's voice replied in her ear. "Remember the plan." Footsteps echoed through the hallways, multiple sets approaching from different directions. That wasn't part of the plan. They had expected Jenkins, possibly with Thompson, but this sounded like more. The double doors to the courtroom swung open, and Officer Jenkins entered, his uniform replaced by plain clothes, his usual swagger diminished by the hunted look in his eyes. Behind him came not just Thompson, but Captain Sullivan himself, and two other officers Zora didn't recognize. "Quite the welcome committee," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady as she counted 5 armed men instead of the expected 2. "I said I'd meet with Jenkins alone." Sullivan stepped forward, his silver hair catching the dim light filtering through dusty windows. "Change of plans, Miss Washington. We're not interested in deals with children. Where's your father?" The unexpected deviation sent a spike of fear through Zora, but she maintained her composure. "He's not coming until I confirm it's safe." That was the arrangement. Sullivan laughed, a cold sound that echoed in the empty chamber. "There is no arrangement. There never was. This was always about drawing him out." At that moment, Zora realized the terrible truth. They had never believed she was really offering a deal. This had been a counter-trap all along, with her as the bait to lure her father. "You should have stayed in your lane, little girl," Jenkins said, moving closer, his hand resting on his weapon. "But you had to make that phone call, didn't you? Had to cry to Daddy about the mean police officer. And now look where we are," Sullivan added. "Your father's career destroyed, your future in shambles. And for what? Because you couldn't handle being put in your place." Zora forced herself to remain calm, playing for time as she knew her father and Elena would be registering. Every word through her concealed mic. "If you hurt me, you'll never find the evidence he's gathered," she said. "It's already been distributed to multiple secure locations." Jenkins scoffed. "We don't need to find it. Your father will bring it to us or watch you die. That's how this works now." The cold finality in his voice made it clear they had no intention of letting either Washington leave the building alive. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ambush. And then the situation deteriorated further as the doors opened once more, and a distinguished man in an expensive suit entered, flanked by 2 more men with the unmistakable bearing of private security. Senator William Richards had arrived personally to oversee the operation. "Miss Washington," he said with the practiced charm that had won him multiple elections, "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your father has caused me quite a bit of inconvenience." "The feeling's mutual, Senator," Zora replied, her mind racing as she assessed the increasingly dangerous situation. 7 armed men now surrounded her, and the original plan was in tatters. Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I admire your spirit. It's unfortunate it's been so badly misdirected." Officer Jenkins was simply doing his job, maintaining order in our community And your privilege tantrum has spiraled into this unnecessary drama. He sighed theatrically. But it ends today. Call your father. Tell him to come alone with all evidence he's gathered. Zora stood her ground, buying precious seconds. And if I refuse? Richards nodded to one of his security men, who instantly produced a syringe. Then we'll simply have to report the tragic overdose of a troubled young drug dealer who couldn't handle the pressure of her impending trial. The threat hung in the air, leaving no doubt about their intentions. In that moment, Zora's earpiece crackled with her father's voice, too soft for anyone but her to hear. Plan B, 30 seconds. Their backup plan had always accounted for betrayal, but not at this scale. Still, Zora knew exactly what she needed to do. She reached slowly into her pocket, causing all 7 men to tense. Easy, she said, withdrawing her phone. I'll call. Him. As she dialed, Zora cast a glance at the ornate clock on the wall. 12 seconds. Dad, she said when Marcus answered, the call broadcasting through her earpiece while appearing normal to her captors. They've changed the terms. Sullivan and Richards are both here. They want you to come alone. She paused, listening to instructions. Only she could hear. Yes, I understand. Another glance at the clock. 10 seconds. He's on his way, she told Richards, sliding the phone back into her pocket. Good girl, Richards said condescendingly. I knew you'd see reason. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Zora closed her eyes briefly. 2. 1. The courthouse plunged into sudden, complete darkness as the EMP device Elena had planted earlier activated, disabling all electronics within the building. In the same instant, the flashbang grenades Marcus had positioned exploded, their disorienting light and sound creating chaos in the darkened room. Trained for exactly this scenario, Zora dropped to the floor, rolling beneath the heavy judge's bench as gunfire erupted blindly in the darkness. The sound of breaking glass and more flashbangs indicated that Marcus and Elena were making their entry from multiple points. Shouted commands and confused cries filled the air. Through it all, Zora remained hidden, her heart hammering against her ribs as the carefully planned sting operation devolved into a chaotic firefight. A strong hand suddenly gripped her arm, causing her to strike out instinctively. "It's me," her father's voice whispered. "We need to move now." They crawled through the darkness toward a side exit, the sounds of struggle continuing behind them. "Elena?" Zora whispered. "Engaging the targets," Marcus replied grimly. "She's buying us time." They had almost reached the exit when the emergency lights flickered on, their weak glow revealing Sullivan standing in their path, weapon raised. "End of the line, Washington," he snarled, finger tightening on the trigger. The gunshot that followed didn't come from Sullivan's weapon. The police captain looked down in shock at the spreading red stain on his chest before collapsing forward. Behind him stood Elena, her service weapon still raised. "Go," she shouted. "I'll hold them off." Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between helping his longtime colleague and protecting his daughter. "Elena, I've got this," she insisted. "Get Zora out. Finish the mission." With a grim nod, Marcus pulled Zora through the exit and into the night. Behind them, more gunshots echoed through the courthouse. They had escaped the immediate trap, but at what cost? And with Richards and his men in pursuit, their most dangerous hours still lay ahead. Rain pounded against the windows of the abandoned waterfront warehouse where Marcus had established their emergency fallback position. Medical supplies lay scattered around him as Zora helped bandage a fresh wound on his arm, sustained during their narrow escape from the courthouse. Their planned sting operation had gone catastrophically wrong, and Elena's fate remained unknown. "Ta." Secure satellite phone on the table buzzed, displaying a number Marcus didn't recognize. He answered cautiously, putting it on speaker. "Washington." Senator Richards' smooth voice filled the space. "I believe we have something that belongs to you." A rustling sound, then Elena's voice, strained but defiant. "Don't give them anything. Marcus, Her words cut off abruptly, replaced by Richard's again. "Your deputy director is quite resilient. Admirable, really. But everyone has a breaking point." Marcus's face remained impassive, but Zora could see the muscle working in his jaw. "What do you want?" "The same thing I've wanted from the beginning. All evidence against me and my associates destroyed. All copies, all backups, everything. And, if I comply, then perhaps Director Cortez survives the night, and perhaps you and your daughter are allowed to leave the country with new identities, never to return. A generous offer, all things considered." Marcus's eyes met Zora's, a silent communication passing between them. "I need proof she's alive." "Check your phone," Richards replied. Seconds later, a video appeared, showing Elena bound to a chair, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, but very much alive. "You have 1 hour. Come alone to Pier 17. Bring all physical evidence and access to all digital copies. If I suspect any tricks, any backup plans, any heroics, well, I think we all understand the stakes." The line went dead, leaving father and daughter in tense silence. "You can't give him everything," Zora finally said. "Once he has what he wants, he'll kill all of us." "I know," Marcus replied, already moving to gather equipment. "But we don't have a choice about meeting him. Elena risked everything to protect us." "So what's the plan?" Zora asked. Marcus paused, studying his daughter's face. In the days since a random act of racism had upended their lives, he'd watched her grow from a bright, determined teenager into something more, a partner he could trust in the most dangerous operation of his career. "Richards believes he's won," Marcus said. "He thinks I'm desperate, cornered, with no options left but surrender, and that's exactly what we need him to keep thinking." As he outlined his strategy, Zora realized just how high the stakes had become. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about exposing corruption that reached to the highest levels of government, about saving Elena's life, about ensuring that dozens of framed teenagers and their families received justice. "It's risky," she said when he finished. Marcus nodded. "Extremely. If anything goes wrong—" "It won't," Zora interrupted with conviction that belied her years. "We've come too far to fail now." An hour later, Marcus approached Pier 17 alone, a waterproof case in one hand containing what appeared to be hard drives and documents. His face betrayed nothing as he limped slightly from his earlier injuries, seemingly a man defeated. Richards waited under the harsh glare of floodlights, flanked by Jenkins and 4 armed security personnel. Elena knelt on the wet concrete, hands bound behind her back, a guard standing over her with a gun pressed to her head. "That's far enough," Richards called as Marcus reached the middle of the pier. "Open the case slowly." Marcus complied, revealing the promised evidence. "All of it. The digital copies, too." "Everything," Marcus confirmed, including access codes to the secure server where the backups are stored. Richards smiled thinly. "And your daughter? Where is she?" "Safe. Not part of." "This exchange, I'm afraid she is," Richards countered. "My terms were clear. You, your daughter, and all evidence in exchange for Cortez's life and your safe passage out of the country." "She's been through enough," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "This ends with me." Richards sighed, as if disappointed in a child. "Always the hero, aren't you, Washington? Even now you can't help trying to control the situation." He nodded to Jenkins. "Find the girl. She can't be far." As Jenkins moved to leave, Marcus tensed visibly. Exactly the reaction Richards had been hoping for. "That's better," the senator said. "Now we understand each other. Your daughter for your deputy director. Seems fair, doesn't it?" "Let Elena go first," Marcus demanded. "Then I'll tell you where to find Zora." Richards laughed. "That's not how this works. The evidence first, then your daughter, Then perhaps Director Cortez walks free. I say perhaps because, frankly, she knows too much to ever truly be safe. The standoff stretched between them, rain continuing to pour in sheets across the pier. Finally, Marcus slid the case toward Richards with a defeated gesture. The access codes are inside. Everything you asked for. As one of Richards' men retrieved the case, the senator studied Marcus carefully. You know what puzzles me, Washington? A man with your experience, your resources, surrendering so easily. It makes me wonder what I'm missing. Marcus met his gaze steadily. You're missing the obvious. A father will do anything to protect his child, even sacrifice himself. Richards nodded thoughtfully. True, which is why I never had children myself. Too much vulnerability. He opened the case, examining its contents with satisfaction before turning back to Marcus. Now, about your daughter. Before he could finish, floodlights suddenly illuminated the pier from all directions, followed by the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors. A voice boomed through a megaphone. Federal agents, drop your weapons. You are surrounded. For a split second, confusion reigned. Richards's men raised their weapons defensively, looking to their employer for direction. Marcus used that moment of hesitation to lunge toward Elena, tackling her and her guard to the ground as gunfire erupted across the pier. Richards shouted commands that were lost in the chaos, retreating toward the warehouse behind them. As bullets splintered the wooden planks around them, Marcus worked to free Elena's restraints. Plan C? She asked with grim humor, despite her injuries. Judge Harper came through, Marcus confirmed, pulling her behind a stack of crates as the firefight continued. Federal marshals, FBI, a full tactical team. Richards didn't just threaten a CIA officer, he threatened a federal witness. Elena managed a pained smile. And the evidence? Decoy case, Marcus replied. The real evidence was never at risk. A sudden cry of pain cut through the gunfire, followed by Richards's voice, now tinged with desperation. Washington, call them off. Or she dies. Marcus peered around the crates to see the senator dragging a struggling figure toward a waiting boat at the end of the pier. His blood ran cold as he recognized Zora, who had apparently been captured attempting to infiltrate the warehouse from the rear as planned. Despite her training, she was no match for Richard's desperation. The senator had a gun pressed to her temple as he backed toward his escape route. Everyone, stand down, Marcus shouted, stepping into the open with his hands raised. Hold your... Fire! The federal agents hesitated, caught between following his command and continuing their assault on Richards' remaining men. In that moment of uncertainty, Richards continued his retreat, using Zora as a human shield. A trade, Washington, he called. Your daughter's life for mine. I walk away, she lives. That's the deal. Time seemed to slow as Marcus assessed his options, calculating trajectories and probabilities with the precision of his decades in intelligence work. He knew Richards would never let Zora live, regardless of any deal. The moment he reached that boat, both Washingtons would be as good as dead, but the distance was too great, the angle too poor for him to risk a shot with Zora so close to the target. Okay, Richards, he called, taking a cautious step forward. You win. Just don't hurt her. The senator's triumphant smile never reached his eyes as he continued backing toward the boat, dragging Zora with him step by step. What Richards failed to notice in his focus on Marcus was the subtle shift in Zora's posture, the calculated movement of her free hand reaching, not in resistance but with purpose, toward her jacket pocket. Marcus saw it, though, and understood immediately. Judge Harper's people might have provided the tactical team, but the most crucial element of their backup plan had always been Zora herself. Last chance, Washington, Richards called, now just steps from the boat. Call your people off entirely, or say goodbye to your daughter. It's not my call anymore, Senator, Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly across the pier. It's hers. At that signal, Zora's hand emerged from her pocket, holding a small taser that Elena had provided her. In one fluid motion, She pressed it against Richard's side and activated it. The senator's body convulsed as electricity coursed through him, his finger reflexively squeezing the trigger of his gun. The shot went wild as both he and Zora tumbled to the pier. Federal agents swarmed forward, securing Richards before he could recover, while Marcus raced to his daughter's side. The showdown had reached its conclusion, though the war was far from over. As medics attended to Elena and the federal agents took control of the scene, Marcus helped Zora to her feet. Her expression was one of grim satisfaction as they watched. Senator Richards being led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him. "It worked," she said simply. "It worked," Marcus agreed, though they both knew that what lay ahead, investigations, trials, public scrutiny, would test them in ways perhaps even more challenging than the violence they had just survived. But for now, in this moment, standing on a rain-soaked pier with justice finally within reach, it was enough. 3 months after the dramatic showdown at Pier 17, Zora Washington stood at the back of a crowded federal courthouse, watching as Officer Richard Jenkins was led away in handcuffs, his face ashen as the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. The trial had captured national attention, exposing a corruption network that stretched from street-level policing to the highest echelons of state government. The evidence Marcus had meticulously gathered proved devastating. Financial records revealed millions in drug money flowing through offshore accounts. Testimony from dozens of wrongfully accused teenagers and their families painted a picture of systematic racism and abuse of power. And most damning of all, the recordings Marcus had secretly made of his conversations with Richards detailed the entire conspiracy in the senator's own words. Officer Thompson had turned state's evidence early, hoping for leniency. Captain Sullivan, recovering from the gunshot wound Elena had inflicted during their escape from the courthouse, had followed suit when faced with the mountain of evidence against him. But Jenkins and Richards had maintained their innocence to the end, claiming they were the victims of a rogue CIA operation. The jury hadn't believed them. For Zora, watching Jenkins's final moments of freedom felt like closing a chapter that had begun with a slap in Riverside Park. The bruise on her cheek had long since faded. But the memory of that moment, the casual cruelty and the assumption that she could be abused with impunity, would remain with her forever. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded her as she emerged with her father and Elena, who had made a full recovery from her injuries. "Zora, how does it feel to see Jenkins convicted? Are you planning to sue the police department? What's next for you now that your name has been cleared?" She had become a reluctant public figure, her face known across the country as the teenager who had helped bring down a corrupt senator. The media had initially tried to paint her as either a victim or a privileged child using her father's position for revenge. But as the truth emerged and more victims came forward, the narrative had shifted. Now she was seen as something else entirely, a symbol of resistance against systemic injustice. "I'm just glad the truth came out," she told the reporters, her voice steady and clear. "This was never about me. It was about all the kids who didn't have a CIA director for a father, the ones who had no one to fight for them when they were wrongfully accused." The case had triggered investigations into police departments across the state, with dozens of convictions already overturned and hundreds more under review. Federal civil rights probes had been launched, consent decrees implemented, and a wave of police leadership resignations had followed. But for the families who had suffered, justice was still incomplete. Many of the wrongfully accused teenagers still struggled with the aftermath of their ordeals, educational opportunities lost, scholarships revoked, emotional trauma lingering, which was why Zora's next announcement captured headlines nationwide. "Today, I'm launching the Truth and Justice Initiative," she told the assembled press, a nationwide advocacy organization dedicated to supporting victims of racial profiling and police misconduct. "We'll provide legal assistance, educational support, and a platform for voices that have been systematically silenced." The funding had come from an unexpected source. Elena, who had been promoted to acting director of the CIA after Marcus stepped down, had connected Zora with wealthy donors concerned about civil rights. Among them was Judge Harper, whose own foundation provided the initial grant to get the initiative off the ground. Marcus Washington stood silently beside his daughter. As she addressed the media, his resignation from the CIA had been inevitable after using agency resources for what technically remained a personal matter, despite the larger conspiracy they had uncovered. But he harbored no regrets. Some prices were worth paying. The weeks following Richards's arrest had been a whirlwind of grand jury hearings, congressional inquiries, and closed-door intelligence briefings. Marcus had violated protocols, certainly, but the scale of corruption he had exposed, which eventually linked Richards to foreign entities attempting to influence state politics through drug money, had ultimately been deemed a matter of national security. Rather than prosecution, he had been allowed a quiet resignation and had since focused on supporting his daughter's vision for systemic change. The final domino fell a week later when Senator William Richards was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for racketeering, conspiracy, drug trafficking, and attempted murder. As the gavel came down, Zora and Marcus exchanged a glance that communicated more than words ever could. Acknowledgement of the journey they had traveled together, from a moment of seemingly random racism to the exposure of a corruption network that had terrorized their community for years. That evening, as they walked through Riverside Park, the very location where their ordeal had begun, Zora paused at the picnic table where Jenkins had slapped her all those months ago. "Sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out," she said quietly. "If he had just left me alone that day, if I hadn't called you." Marcus considered this. "Evil thrives when good people stay silent," he said finally. "What happened to you was terrible, but it exposed something that needed to be brought to light. Something that was hurting many others who didn't have the resources we did to fight back." Zora nodded, looking out over the park where children played freely, no longer under the watchful eye of corrupt officers looking for their next victim. "I never wanted to be a symbol or an activist," she admitted. "I just wanted to study calculus in the park without being harassed because of my skin color." "And now?" Marcus asked. A small smile played at the corners of Zora's mouth as she thought about the office space being prepared for the Truth and Justice Initiative, the team of lawyers and advocates being assembled, and the dozens of cases already on their docket. "Now, I want to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else," she replied. "And if it does, I want them to know they're not fighting alone." As twilight descended over the city, father and daughter walked on, leaving the park behind. In her pocket, Zora carried the acceptance letter from Harvard Law School, where she would begin classes the following fall. The path ahead was clear, now shaped by an encounter that had been meant to diminish her, but had instead revealed her strength. Behind them, in the shadows of the trees, a news crew captured their departure, the reporter already framing the story of the teenager whose courage had sparked a national reckoning with police corruption and racial injustice. But for Zora and Marcus, the cameras and headlines were background noise to the more important work yet to be done. The ongoing fight for a justice system that lived up to its name for everyone, regardless of their color or connections. It was a fight they now knew how to win. This story reminds us that justice often requires courage in the face of overwhelming odds. When systems meant to protect us become corrupted, it takes extraordinary determination to stand against them. Zora's journey shows that a single moment of injustice, when challenged rather than accepted, can expose deeper patterns of corruption. Her transformation from victim to advocate illustrates how personal trauma can fuel meaningful change when channeled properly. Marcus demonstrates that true parental love means fighting for your child's dignity, even at great personal cost. Most importantly, the story teaches us that racial discrimination is never isolated. It's typically a symptom of deeper systemic problems that affect many others. The victory wasn't just about clearing Zora's name, but about creating lasting change for all those without the resources to fight back. When we witness injustice, remaining silent only empowers those who abuse their authority. By standing together and documenting the truth, even the most entrenched corruption can be dismantled. What would you do if you witnessed someone being racially profiled? Would you have the courage to speak up, or would fear keep you silent? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever experienced discrimination from those in positions of power? Your stories matter and could help others feel less alone in their struggles. If you believe in fighting for justice and equality for all, hit that subscribe button and join our community dedicated to sharing powerful stories of courage and resilience. Like this video if you think more people need to understand how corruption can hide behind badges and titles. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply refusing to be silenced. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never stop fighting for what's right.